Hey everyone, welcome back. It's time for another deep dive. And today we're taking a look at Donald Trump's latest speech, the one he gave in Phoenix.
Yeah, this one's getting a lot of attention.
It really is. It's like he's giving us a preview of what he'd do if he gets a second term.
Exactly, a kind of blueprint for his 2024 agenda.
And let me tell you, some of these proposals are pretty attention-grabbing, to say the least.
Definitely. It's a mix of familiar themes and some new things that are raising eyebrows.
Like talking about gender transition insanity.
Yeah.
And potentially launching the biggest deportation operation we've ever seen.
Not to mention that comment about the Panama Canal. That one came out of left field.
Okay, so let's break this all down. Starting with the thing that's really dominating the headlines, Trump's comments about what he calls gender transition insanity. He's talking about some pretty sweeping executive orders, right?
Right off the bat, he's saying that on day one, if he's elected, he'd sign executive orders banning transgender individuals from serving in the military. And he's going further than that. He wants to restrict access to gender-affirming care for minors. And he's really emphasizing this idea of recognizing only male and female genders in federal policy.
It sounds like this is about more than just policy specifics. It almost feels like a bigger cultural statement.
It definitely taps into this broader trend we're seeing, especially within the Republican Party. There's this growing push to legislate what they see as traditional values.
And they often frame it as protecting children.
Exactly. It's playing out in all these debates we're seeing about LGBTQ plus rights, bathroom bills, what's being taught in schools. It's becoming a defining issue for their base.
So how might this approach actually play out if he wins in 2024?
Well, for one thing, you can bet there would be legal challenges. Advocacy groups would be arguing that these executive orders are discriminatory.
Right.
And then there are the practical questions. How do you actually enforce something like this? How would the military implement a ban on transgender service members? How do you restrict access to healthcare? It gets really complicated really fast.
It also seems like this could make things even more tense politically. We're already so divided.
Absolutely. This issue is incredibly personal for so many people, and it gets at these fundamental beliefs about identity and individual rights. I don't see how this wouldn't lead to more division and probably even more protests and activism.
Okay, let's move on to another big topic from his speech. Immigration. He's not backing down on this at all, is he?
Nope, he's sticking with America first, and he's proposing some pretty dramatic actions like classifying Mexican drug cartels as terrorist organizations.
What would that even mean?
It would give the government a lot more power to target them, including using military force. And he also talked about bringing back that Remain in Mexico policy. You know, the one that makes asylum seekers stay in Mexico while their cases are being processed here. And then there's the possibility of a huge deportation operation like we've never seen before.
This sounds familiar. Haven't we heard this before? Are these just his 2016 campaign promises all over again?
Some of it does echo his past rhetoric, but there are some new wrinkles too, like classifying drug cartels as terrorists. That's a major escalation. And it's not even clear if it's legally possible.
How so?
Well, to label a group as a terrorist organization, you have to meet certain criteria, like proving they have a foreign base of operations, which might be tough to do with the cartels.
So even if he wins, actually putting these policies into action could be way more complicated than he's making it sound.
Exactly. And then you have to think about the consequences. What happens if the U.S. labels Mexican cartels as terrorists and starts using military force against them? It could really damage our relationship with Mexico. And that could have a ripple effect on things like trade and security cooperation.
Okay, before we move on, I have to ask about that comment on the Panama Canal. That one really threw.
Yeah, it caught a lot of people off guard. He seemed to be suggesting that the U.S. should think about taking back control of the Panama Canal.
The one we handed over to Panama back in 1999.
The very same. It's hard to know if he's serious about this or if it's just a way to get attention and appeal to his base.
But what if he is serious? What would that even look like? This isn't like some domestic policy you can just reverse. This involves international agreements, and it could cause a huge diplomatic mess.
No doubt about it. The Panama Canal is a crucial waterway for global trade. Any attempt by the U.S. to take it over would probably trigger international condemnation and maybe even economic sanctions. It could also make the U.S. look really bad on the world stage, like we can't be trusted to keep our word.
That's a big risk, even for Trump. What do you think his game is here?
It's tough to say. Maybe he's just testing the waters, seeing how much support there is for this idea. Maybe it's a distraction from other issues, or maybe he's trying to tap into that nationalist sentiment that's out there. Or hey, maybe he actually thinks this is a good idea. Who knows?
Whatever the reason, it's definitely gotten people talking. And it raises some big questions about what U.S. foreign policy would look like under another Trump presidency.
Exactly. And speaking of talking, we asked some of our listeners to share their thoughts on all this, and we got some really fascinating responses. We'll dive into those after a quick break.
Sounds good. I'm curious to hear what people are saying.
Me too. Buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride. It's interesting to see how people are reacting to Trump's agenda. It's like he's thrown a big rock into a pond and the ripples are going out in all directions.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. We asked our listeners what they thought, and we got some really diverse responses. It's clear that Trump's hitting some nerves.
Definitely. It's not just about agreeing or disagreeing with his policies. It's deeper than that. It's about how people see America and what they want for the future.
Like we heard from Lisa in California, and she wrote in to say that she doesn't agree with everything Trump says, but she appreciates that he's at least talking about issues that other politicians are ignoring. She feels like he's giving a voice to people who feel forgotten.
That's a common thread among Trump supporters. They feel like he's the only one who gets it, who understands their anxieties about the economy and immigration, and what they see as a decline in traditional values.
But then you have someone like Mark from Texas, and he's a parent of a transgender child, and he's really worried about what Trump's proposals could mean for LGBTQ plus rights. He sees it as a direct attack on his family, and he's afraid it could lead to more discrimination and violence.
And that's a fear that a lot of people share. They see Trump's rhetoric as dangerous and divisive, and they worry that it could set back progress on things like equality and social justice.
So you have these two very different viewpoints, and they're both coming from a genuine place. It really shows you how hard it is to find common ground in such a polarized political environment.
Absolutely. It's not just about Democrats versus Republicans anymore. There are divisions within families and communities. It's like the fabric of American society is being pulled in different directions.
So how do we make sense of all this? How do we go beyond these individual stories and get a better understanding of where the country stands on Trump's 2024 agenda?
Well, one way is to look at public opinion polls. They can give us a broader picture. For example, on transgender issues, polls show that more and more Americans support equal rights for LGBTQ plus individuals, but there's still a big gap between Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, Republicans are much more likely to support policies that restrict transgender rights.
Exactly. So even if Trump's stance on transgender issues appeals to his base, it could alienate moderate voters who are more supportive of LGBTQ plus rights.
And it's a similar story with immigration.
Right. Most Americans actually support a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, but there's also strong support for border security, especially among Republicans.
So Trump's hardline stance on immigration might fire up his base, but it could turn off swing voters who are looking for more nuanced solutions.
It seems like Trump's strategy is to double down on the issues that got him elected in 2016. Appeal to his base and exploit these existing divisions, even if it means making the country even more polarized.
But the big question is, will it work again? Will those same tactics be enough to win in 2024? The country has changed a lot since then.
That's the million-dollar question. Can he convince enough undecided voters that he's the right person for the job? Can he persuade them that his vision for America is one that includes them? It's going to be a fascinating race to watch.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. Trump's views on transgender issues, immigration, and of course that curveball about the Panama Canal. It's a lot to process.
It really is. And I think it all points to a bigger question.
Yeah.
What's Trump's vision for America? What kind of country is he trying to create?
Well, if you look at his rhetoric, it's clear that he's tapping into this sense of nostalgia among some Americans. This longing for a time when things felt simpler, when America was seen as the undisputed leader of the world.
It's like he's promising to make America great again. Exactly. He's playing to those who feel like the country has lost its way, that traditional values are under attack, and that America's global power is fading.
And he's presenting himself as the solution, the strong leader who can fix it all.
Right. It's a classic populist strategy. Find an enemy, whether real or imagined, and position yourself as the protector, the only one who can save the day.
It worked for him in 2016, but the question is, will it work again in 2024? The world has changed. America has changed. Have we moved past that kind of rhetoric?
That's the big unknown. Is Trump's message still relevant in today's America? Can he connect with voters who are struggling with different issues now?
It's like he's trying to turn back time. But the clock keeps ticking, doesn't it? We can't just ignore the challenges of the 21st century.
That's the point. This election isn't just about going back to the way things were. It's about deciding what kind of future we want for America. Do we want to build a more inclusive society? Do we want to cooperate with other countries to solve global problems? Or do we want to go it alone?
These are tough questions, and there are no easy answers. But one thing's for sure. We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to decide our future. We have to engage. We have to make our voices heard.
That's right. We need to be informed, we need to have those difficult conversations, and we need to hold our leaders accountable no matter who they are.
Well said. And on that note, we want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Donald Trump's 2024 agenda. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking.
Remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. Keep exploring these issues, keep asking questions, and keep engaging in the political process because the future of America is in our hands.
Thanks for listening. And until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep those conversations going.